Chapter 15. The British Empire in India, 18th–19th centuries, Railways and Rule. The British Empire's rule over India from the mid-18th century through the 19th century represents one of the most significant examples of how technological advances, specifically in infrastructure, communication, and weaponry, were used to dominate and control a vast population. The British leveraged cutting-edge technology, including railways, telegraphs, and firearms, to solidify their hold on India, effectively transforming the subcontinent into a colony that supplied resources, wealth, and labor to the British Empire. By the mid-19th century, British control over India had shifted from a commercial interest led by the East India Company to direct imperial rule after the Indian Rebellion of 1857. The British rapidly expanded their use of railways and telegraphs, connecting distant regions, speeding up the movement of troops, and improving communication across the subcontinent. These technological innovations not only enabled the British to manage a vast territory, but also facilitated the extraction of resources, the suppression of revolts, and the economic integration of India into the British Empire. In this chapter, we will explore how the British Empire used technology to control India, focusing on the role of railways, telegraphs, and military innovations. The chapter will also examine how these technologies, though initially designed to serve the colonial state, transformed Indian society and economy in ways that continue to shape the region today. The rise of the British East India Company. The foundation of British control over India was laid by the British East India Company (EIC), a commercial enterprise that gradually became a powerful political and military force. Initially established in 1600 to engage in trade with India and the East Indies, the EIC gained increasing power through treaties, alliances, and military victories, particularly after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, when Robert Clive's forces defeated the Nawab of Bengal. This victory allowed the EIC to assert control over Bengal, the richest province in India, and marked the beginning of British dominance over the subcontinent. By the early 19th century, the East India Company had expanded its control over much of India through both direct conquest and strategic alliances with Indian rulers. However, the EIC was not only a commercial enterprise but also a political and military entity, with its own private armies and administrative structures. It used military technology, such as muskets, artillery, and cavalry, to suppress uprisings and defeat local rulers, consolidating its control over Indian territory. British soldiers and Indian sepoys, Indian soldiers in the British Army, were armed with superior firearms, giving them a decisive advantage over the traditional armies of Indian rulers. Railways, the lifeline of British control. One of the most significant technological innovations used by the British to maintain their control over India was the development of the railway network. The introduction of railways in India was initially motivated by the need to transport raw materials, particularly cotton, tea, opium, and jute, to ports for export to Britain. However, the railways quickly became a crucial tool for the British administration to project power, control the population, and respond rapidly to uprisings. The first railway line in India, connecting Mumbai, then Bombay, to Tain, was inaugurated in 1853. Over the next several decades, the British expanded the railway network rapidly, building thousands of miles of track across the subcontinent. By 1870, India had over 5,000 miles of railway, and by the end of the 19th century, the country boasted one of the largest rail networks in the world. The railways served several key functions for the British. 1. Military mobilization. Railways allowed the British to move troops quickly across the vast Indian subcontinent. In the past, it had taken weeks or even months to mobilize forces, but with the advent of railways, soldiers could be transported rapidly to any part of the country. This was particularly crucial in the wake of the Indian Rebellion of 1857, when the British realized the need for quicker responses to uprisings and conflicts. The ability to quickly deploy troops helped the British maintain control over India's many regions and prevent large-scale rebellion. 2. Resource extraction. The British used the railways to efficiently transport raw materials from the interior of India to coastal ports for export to Britain. The extraction of cotton, tea, and opium became more efficient with the expansion of the railway network, turning India into a key supplier of raw materials for British industries. The railways were designed with export in mind, connecting areas rich in natural resources to major ports like Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras. This infrastructure facilitated the economic exploitation of India's wealth and resources, benefiting British industry at the expense of local economies. 3. Administrative control. Railways allowed British officials and administrators to travel quickly across the subcontinent, improving communication between the central government and distant provinces. This improved governance and enabled the British to enforce their laws and regulations more effectively. It also allowed the British to centralize their control over India, making the administration of such a vast and diverse territory more manageable. 4. Cultural integration and disruption. While the railways were primarily designed to serve the interests of the British Empire, they also had unintended consequences for Indian society. Railways connected regions that had previously been isolated, facilitating the movement of people and goods. This led to increased internal trade and the spread of ideas, but it also disrupted traditional local economies and social structures. The railways enabled British cultural and economic influence to penetrate deep into Indian society, accelerating the integration of India into the global capitalist system. Despite the benefits of railways for the British, the system was built primarily to serve the needs of the colonizers rather than the local population. Passenger services were segregated by class, with Indian passengers often relegated to overcrowded and unsanitary third-class compartments. Moreover, the economic benefits of the railways were skewed heavily in favor of the British, who reaped the profits from resource extraction and trade. Telegraphs, speeding up communication and control. In addition to the railways, the British introduced the telegraph to India, further enhancing their ability to control the subcontinent. The telegraph allowed for instant communication between different parts of the country, a revolutionary development in an era when messages had previously taken weeks or months to reach their destinations. The first telegraph line in India was established in 1851, connecting Calcutta and Diamond Harbour. By the time of the Indian Rebellion in 1857, a more extensive network of telegraph lines had been constructed, linking the major cities of India to British military and administrative centres. The telegraph played a crucial role in enabling the British to coordinate their response to the rebellion, allowing commanders to communicate with one another and with London in real time. The telegraph also served to strengthen British control over India in several ways. 1. Military coordination. During times of conflict, such as the Indian Rebellion of 1857, the telegraph allowed British commanders to coordinate troop movements and share intelligence quickly and efficiently. The ability to send and receive information instantaneously gave the British a significant advantage in suppressing uprisings and maintaining order. 2. Administrative efficiency. The telegraph enabled faster communication between British administrators in different parts of India. This improved the efficiency of the colonial government and allowed the British to implement policies and enforce laws more effectively. It also strengthened the centralization of British rule, as decisions made in Calcutta or London could be communicated to distant provinces almost immediately. 3. Economic integration. The telegraph facilitated the integration of India into the global economy by allowing British merchants and officials to stay informed about market conditions and trade opportunities in real time. This helped the British manage their trade networks more effectively, and ensured that Indian resources were efficiently extracted and exported to Britain. While the telegraph was a tool of colonial control, it also had broader social and economic impacts. Like the railways, the telegraph helped connect distant regions of India, promoting internal communication and trade. However, the benefits of this technology were unevenly distributed, as the telegraph was primarily used by the British administration and business interests. The Indian population had limited access to the technology, and its use was largely restricted to the colonial elite. Military innovations, firearms, artillery, and suppression. The British maintained their dominance over India not only through infrastructure and communication, but also through their superior military technology, particularly firearms and artillery. From the late 18th century onwards, the British had access to the most advanced weaponry of the time, including muskets, rifles, cannons, and field artillery. These weapons gave British forces a significant advantage over Indian armies, which were often equipped with older weapons and relied on traditional cavalry. The British East India Company initially relied on a mix of European and Indian soldiers, with sepoys making up a large portion of the British Indian Army. The sepoys were trained in European military tactics and armed with British firearms, which gave them an edge in battle. However, the reliance on sepoys also created tensions, as many Indian soldiers resented their treatment by British officers and felt disillusioned with the increasing cultural and religious insensitivity of the British authorities. These tensions came to a head in the Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, which was triggered in part by the introduction of a new type of rifle cartridge that was rumored to be greased with cow and pig fat, offensive to both Hindus and Muslims. The rebellion spread rapidly, with sepoys in several regions rising up against the British and declaring their loyalty to the deposed Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah II. The rebellion was ultimately crushed by the British, who used their superior military technology, including artillery and reinforcements from Britain, to suppress the insurgents. The rebellion marked a turning point in British rule in India. In 1858, the British government dissolved the East India Company and assumed direct control over India, establishing the British Raj. The British also reorganized their military forces in India, increasing the number of British soldiers and reducing their reliance on sepoys. The rebellion highlighted the importance of maintaining technological superiority in military conflicts, as the British were able to use their advanced weaponry to overcome numerically superior Indian forces. By the economic impact of British rule and technological exploitation. While the British Empire's use of railways, telegraphs, and firearms allowed it to maintain control over India, these technologies also had profound economic consequences. The British reorganized the Indian economy to serve their interests, focusing on the extraction of raw materials for export to Britain. India became a key supplier of cotton, tea, opium, and indigo, all of which were in high demand in Europe. The British invested in infrastructure primarily to facilitate this extraction, building railways to connect resource-rich areas with ports, rather than to promote internal development. The economic exploitation of India by the British had devastating effects on local industries and communities. For example, British policies led to the collapse of the Indian textile industry, which had once been one of the most advanced in the world. British manufacturers using raw cotton from India flooded the Indian market with cheap machine-made textiles, driving Indian weavers out of business. This deindustrialization had long-term effects on the Indian economy, contributing to widespread poverty and unemployment. In addition to undermining local industries, British economic policies exacerbated famine and food shortages in India. The emphasis on cash crops like cotton and indigo reduced the amount of land available for food production, making India more vulnerable to famine. The British government's failure to adequately address famines, such as the Great Famine of 1876-78, which killed millions, further highlighted the disconnect between British economic interests and the welfare of the Indian population. Inclusion. The British Empire's control over India in the 18th and 19th centuries was made possible in large part by its use of technological innovations. The development of railways, telegraphs, and the use of firearms and artillery allowed the British to project power across the subcontinent, suppress uprisings, and extract resources on a vast scale. These technologies transformed India, integrating it into the global economy and making it one of the most important colonies in the British Empire. This book tells the story of how these technologies grew, were exploited, and how they were used to improve the lives of people. However, the British use of technology in India was not solely a story of progress and development. It was also a story of exploitation and inequality. The railways and telegraphs, while facilitating communication and transportation, were primarily designed to serve British interests. The economic benefits of these technologies flowed disproportionately to Britain, while the Indian population faced poverty, famine, and social disruption. As we look back at the British Empire's use of technology to control India, we are reminded of the complex relationship between technological innovation and power. The ability to harness new technologies can create opportunities for development and prosperity